Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Dirks, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Managing Your Library with Folio, the all-new library services platform, which is sponsored by EBSCO. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a couple of features of the webinar software. First off, all of the attendees who are joining us out there today, please know that that you should be automatically muted and your cameras are not live in the session, so please don't worry about generating noise, feedback, anything like that. We have that taken care of. In the main area of the screen, you should, of course, be able to follow along with the presentation materials. And instead of the chat today, we're using the Q&A feature. Please use that to ask questions for our speaker, Christopher, today. At the end of the presentation, he's going to take some time to answer as many questions as you can get to. So please do drop those questions in there throughout. But also note that we often get more questions than we have time to handle. So if we don't get to yours, please know that it's nothing personal. It's just a matter of a time limitation. Also note that there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, you can use that little CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you're active on Twitter, we'd encourage you to use the hashtag ACRL Choice Webinars to live tweet the program. And lastly, also note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version of today's presentation. So with that, we are ready to get started, and I will turn things over to Christopher.
Great, thanks so much, Mark. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And I'm looking forward to talking to you today about Folio. I'm going to, let me share my screen and let's go through some of the agenda items with you. So again, my name is Christopher Hawley. I'm Director of Software as a Service Innovation here at EBSCO. I am looking forward to going through Folio with you. I've been working with ILS systems in every shape and size over the past 20 years, both in libraries and with vendors, and was delighted to sign on board with EBSCO about 5 years ago to work on the Folio project and to really dive into it and get my hands dirty with it, which is super fun, and I just love where we're going with it. So as far as today, I just want to make sure everybody here is on the same page about what Folio is. And Folio is developed by a community. It's not just EBSCO. There are a number of organizations involved in the creation of Folio. And so I think it's important that we talk about those libraries and people and organizations that are involved in it. After that, I will dive into a little bit about what makes Folio truly an innovative solution. And we'll then talk about EBSCO Folio services. So how is EBSCO involved in this project? What kinds of services do we offer? How does Folio integrate and interact with some of the products we have here at EBSCO? And then I'll illustrate a little bit of that with e-resource management in Folio. Obviously, Folio can be used for a whole host of things beyond e-resource management. We were just thinking in this short hour presentation with you all, this might be a nice way to highlight some of those key pieces of not only Folio functionality, but also how Folio can work with some of our EBSCO products. So that's our agenda. Let's get started. So what is Folio? Folio is an entirely new library services platform. It was designed, it's the first new one designed in the past 10 years, and it was truly designed to really take advantage of and take to a new level traditional ILS functionality. One of the nice things about it is that it's built on modern architecture so that we can take advantage of new developments and new pieces of software design. And therefore, we can really take what we might consider that traditional ILS functionality and kind of transform it into the future and give ourselves a really solid trajectory to maybe solve problems that have plagued us over the past 20 years or more with the way ILSs traditionally work. What's nice about Folio is that it is thinking both at present and into the future. And so we're looking at both how it can handle things that we deal with now, from print to e-resource management. So all of that is built into Folio, but it's designed in such a way to be flexible to incorporate other formats, other workflows, other functionality that we might need over time. And so this modern architecture approach to Folio is really a key piece, and I'll talk in more detail about that. Folio is designed by a community of libraries, and primarily academic libraries as it's gotten started. And right now we're in an interesting time where we also have some public libraries who are starting to look at it and consider it and see where different apps and features of Folio might need to be created for public libraries as well. So, but traditionally it's been set up as an academic oriented product. As far as the organization of Folio, Folio is an open source project underneath the Open Library Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to open source in libraries. And I'll talk more about that as well. So one of the things I always like to start with when we're trying to conceptualize Folio, and some of you, if you've seen a Folio presentation, may have seen this before, is that we often think of Folio as a platform. And so what does that mean in real life terms for us? And almost all of us out there probably have some kind of smart device, whether it's a phone or a tablet or something of that nature. And we're used to having that as a platform on which we set up different apps. And Folio is set up with the exact same type of concept. So the beauty here is that you've got these microservices designed apps that really speak to different features and functions and workflows within libraries. And some of these apps may be more specific than what you're used to working with as far as a traditional ILS with maybe a more monolithic module or something of that nature. So the other beauty of this is that it makes it a lot easier to swap in and add new apps, add new features. If there's a whole new way of thinking about something for how hold requests are handled, or how you might handle something within acquisitions or within e-resource management, perhaps it's an opportunity to create a new app to do that. And so it's very easy to decide what you want to use as a library. One of the things we'll also talk about is that some libraries have chosen to go live with a portion of Folio first. They only want to use Folio for e-resource management. And that's easy to do because we just set up that tenant of Folio with just the apps that you need. Or perhaps you're a library who just wants to focus on print management and doesn't need any of the ERM stuff yet. And so we can focus on setting a Folio that just does the print management, or we can set it up for everything. But that's the beauty of Folio, is that it is set up with these microservices apps to be able to swap things in and out. It is also built with full APIs against it so that it's easy to integrate with other systems out there as well. So who's using Folio and what is the community all about? So as I mentioned, the Open Library Foundation is the organization under which Folio lies. Some of the other open source projects that are also under the Open Library Foundation are Project Reshare, ViewFind, as well as GoKB. Now, as far as some of the different libraries that are active within the community, here you can see a wide range of libraries, big and small, who are part of the Folio project and part of the Folio community. Here are some that are part of the US. Here we can see libraries like Cornell, College of the Holy Cross, University of Alabama, University of Chicago, Texas A&M, and others. We also have libraries worldwide that are part of the project as well, and here you can see some of those represented. For libraries who are public libraries who might be starting to express some interest in Folio, I do want to point out that the Shanghai Library in China, one of the largest libraries in the world and a public library, is focused on utilizing Folio and doing a lot of work thinking around what needs to be added and worked with within Folio for public libraries. And so that's a nice new movement within Folio. But regardless, we've got libraries of all shapes and sizes, consortia, to small libraries where it's one building utilizing Folio at this stage. And so it's a very flexible platform to work with all sorts of different libraries. So as far as the community goes, I always like to talk about this a little bit because it's a shift from working with traditional library software that you might acquire from a vendor. With Folio being open source, it actually gives you as libraries the opportunity, if you so choose, to get more involved in the development and the creation process of Folio. So you can choose at whatever level you want to get involved with Folio. If you just want to sit back and get community updates and just run Folio as software, you can certainly do that. If you do want to get more involved though, you can get involved in one of our special interest groups and contribute some of your expertise into the functional requirements of Folio. You can even just keep track of some of the developments that are out there, help out with some of the testing that might need to be done. So there are all sorts of ways that you can get involved with the Folio development process if you want to. We even have librarians and others who aren't even using Folio with their libraries getting involved and doing work within the community because they just believe in it and feel like it's something important and it's good professional development and a great learning experience. So there's a lot of opportunity within the Folio community to help create and shape the Folio product if you so choose. I will talk more about EBSCO services, but in this last point there, I do mention that if you want and you choose to acquire services through EBSCO to run your Folio system, we can also serve as an advocate for you within the Folio community. So again, you can kind of sit back, let EBSCO run the system for you and do that community liaison work for you as well. So if we break up the community into a couple different key areas, at the top, we've got these different councils, the product council, technical council, the community council. And these are different groups that are really helping to manage the overall Folio project as a whole. So as you can see there, the product council is helping define the roadmap and the software strategy, where the technical council is looking more at Folio best practices. And then the community council is really helping to ensure the continuity of Folio and to make sure that there's a healthy ecosystem of people getting involved and working within the Folio community. Now, for those who really kind of want to get into the brass tacks of it all and help design workflows and really get involved with how different functionality might work, that's where the special interest groups are. And that's where I always think of a lot of the magic happening with Folio is within these different special interest groups or SIGs. And these SIGs are broken out by different areas, whether it be circulation, acquisitions, metadata management, or it might be something specific to a library type, like public library, for example, or consortia. So we've got different special interest groups who are really providing a key focus on certain areas within Folio. Each SIG has a product owner to help with the product management therein. So there you can see in that lower middle slide there, it talks about how the product owner really works with the product roadmap, feature requirements, and those sorts of things that get fed to the development team that actually puts that into practice. And then people who are involved in the special interest group are able to test those things. And it becomes a very iterative environment as we're adding and working with new features within the Folio system. So if you are interested in getting involved in Folio, there are all of these different opportunities, from product owner to being a special interest group member, to maybe really thinking you want to be on the top there in a product council, technical council, or community council role, or maybe you're a developer and want to get involved in that way too. So lots of ways to get involved in the community if you so choose. Let's see here. So the meetings and conferences. So how can you get involved with the group? Obviously, pre-COVID, we met in person. There were meetings in Durham and then in College Station, Texas. There you can see those below. The WOLFCon, or Worldwide Open Library Foundation Conference, is the official conference of the Open Library Foundation. So that includes tracks for Folio, as well as other open source projects underneath the Open Library Foundation. As I mentioned, there were some in Durham and College Station, Texas. And next week, we have our first online WolfCon. So if you're interested in attending at least some of the sessions, or even signing up to watch recordings of those sessions afterward, I provided a link here so that you can sign up for the WolfCon conference. It's June 1st through 3rd, so that's next week. It is virtual and it's free. So it's a great way to collaborate, hear directly from people involved in the community and working with the Folio software. In addition to that, EBSCO does sponsor user groups for EBSCO products, and we do include EBSCO Folio and other related services as part of our own conferences and meetings as well. So lots of places to look out for ways to collaborate and meet to talk about Folio as well as other projects. Here's some links that you might find helpful as well. I'll just walk through some of these just so you have a sense of what you might go to and why. Folio.org is really kind of the overarching place where you might sign up for things like the newsletter. Wiki.folio.org is where you're going to get a lot of the detail. You're going to see each of the different special interest groups there. You can find out when they meet. You can also see different projects that they're working on, see who's part of that special interest group. If you want to reach out to the product owner to ask them about where things are and how you might get involved, the wiki is a great place to find all of that information. In addition to that, there's issues.folio, dev.folio, discuss.folio. That's if you're really going to start getting deeply involved in the creation of the Folio system. GitHub is obviously where you can go if you want to download the software yourself and start working with it and playing with it. And then you can go to the Open Library Foundation's YouTube channel to see some really nice videos on a regular basis where members of the Folio community, librarians, and others are talking about new features and functionality. There were some recent ones on circulation rules. There were some on reporting within Folio. There were some on, there's a monthly one actually that talks about what we call the sprint review, where we go over, the developers actually go over new features and functions that have been added into Folio during that month cycle. So great place to go, that YouTube channel, to really focus in on and hear from your peers as far as where certain pieces are with Folio. So just want to talk a little bit more about the innovation and the design behind Folio, just some key pieces there. So I already mentioned that Folio is using modern microservices architecture. Just want to reiterate some of the benefits of that. We already talked about how swapping in apps and adding in and working with development is a key piece in that, setting up a system that only needs the apps and that you actually want to work with. So that's obviously a big piece of this. But what's also nice is it also re-envisions how libraries can work with vendors in different ways. So for example, you could work with EBSCO to support your Folio installation. And so we could run it and host it for you. But then you might want to set up APIs that work with other different software and third-party pieces that are important to you and your workflows. And so there's a lot of flexibility in those different aspects and how you might integrate Folio within your institutions, that you really have a choice in how you're going to work with different systems and the Folio system. As I mentioned, Folio is not monolithic. It's using these smaller apps. So you enjoy easier updates and benefit from faster development. So what I love about Folio is, as you see each of our new releases come out, and they're typically about 3 new releases a year, you'll see a host of new features within some of the apps, and even new apps themselves be released in each of these multiple releases within a year. So it really speaks to the flexibility of designing within Folio. And as I mentioned already, these open APIs allow for easy integration with systems. Structurally, I think it's important to note, as a librarian myself, the metadata management within Folio has innovation in and of itself. So Folio is really based upon a bib frame and Dublin core-like structure. where your existing ILS records are transformed into what we call instance holdings and item record structures. We do store all of your source metadata. So if it happens to be in MARC or some other format, that is maintained and stored as such. But we'll be working with it directly within Folio in these instance holding and item records. And so your Folio apps communicate and directly integrate with these different record types. You have your source records stored as well. And it really positions the library well for moving into that post-MARC world, working with things like linked data, and again, thinking toward the future with how all of this is set up. So I mentioned that there are about 3 releases of Folio per year. What I love about this particular slide is we're now getting to so many releases, I had to actually just put an ellipsis in the middle of the slide. But we started off with the Aster release back in January of 2019, and now we're just releasing the Iris release this month in May 2021. And that's pretty significant because here we're seeing a whole host of releases come out within the past 2 to 3 years. And in addition to that, I'll just mention that as you can see, these are in alphabetical order, and each one's named after a flower. So this was a deliberate theme on behalf of the Folio community. It gives us an easy way to remember these. It also fits with the theme of Folio being a bee. Bees need flowers to pollinate, and the community that is created around the bee, it just was a nice theme around that. So here we are at the Iris release, and we're gearing up already for the Juniper release this summer and the Kiwi release in the fall. So hopefully that gives you a good foundation as far as how to get involved with Folio, what Folio is, who the community members are, and how you might want to join and be part of that. What I want to transition into next are EBSCO Folio services and talk a little bit about how EBSCO is involved in the Folio project and how we can provide services to you if you're so interested. So what is EBSCO Folio? So obviously with any open source software, you can just download it and run it. But a lot of libraries don't want that headache of downloading it, running it, and supporting it and implementing it themselves. They'd rather contract out to somebody else to do that work for them. And in this case, EBSCO can provide that work. So we can provide services, and I'll talk more about what those services are. We can provide hosting around Folio, and then ongoing support of Folio as well. So it really is going to give you open source without worrying about support, open source without hiring additional technical staff, because EBSCO is handling all of this for you. Our hosting is done in an Amazon Web Services cloud environment. We are also ISO 27001 certified, so you get this, the security that comes around that as well. And then the other benefit in working with EBSCO to support and run your Folio system is that we can provide direct integration with our own array of products, whether that's our discovery solution, whether that's some of our ordering products like EBSCOnet or Gobi, whether that's direct integration with our knowledge base, or even things like our usage statistics, our usage consolidation and loading service, and even our new analytics product, which is called Panorama. So we can really provide that direct integration and interoperability with the Folio platform. And so those are some of the benefits of working with EBSCO to run your Folio system. So in addition to EBSCO proper running the system, I know we've got libraries around the world attending this webinar. And I want to mention that EBSCO has also worked with a variety of partners around the world so that we can provide better implementation services that are local to you, so that we provide support in your local language, support in your time zone. And these partners work directly with EBSCO to provide you with EBSCO Folio services. And so here you can see a slide that illustrates just the range of different partners around the world that we work with if you wanted to contract out for support and implementation for Folio. And at the end, I'll have contact information if you're interested in finding out who you'd need to get in touch with and what that partner might be. You can certainly send a message to that link, and we'll make sure you get in touch with the right people. So who's implementing Folio with EBSCO Folio services. Here you can see on the left-hand side, we have a number of libraries who are live already with Folio. Chalmers University in Sweden being the first library to go live with Folio worldwide. Missouri State University being the first library to go live with Folio in the US. We've got libraries large and small listed there. You can also see Cornell University, 5 Colleges Consortium have both chosen to go live with ERM first. So that's certainly an option for some libraries. If you want to just use Folio for certain functionality, for example, ERM, you could do that. We've got a number of libraries who are implementing now, a number of whom are planning to go live within the next month so that they can start off their new fiscal year, July 1, on a new system. And so those are all, many of those are represented here. Let's see here, I'll point out Flagler College in particular. They're a library who's choosing to use Folio for print workflows. So they don't really need to handle their e-resource management in a system. They can handle most of that in a spreadsheet. So they're actually using Folio for their print workflows. So lots of ways to envision how you're going to work with and utilize the Folio software. So why EBSCO? What would be a reason to choose to work with EBSCO to run your Folio system? We do have a very strong commitment to open source projects. And there you can see a list of projects from Koha, the Viewfind, and others where we've been heavily involved in those in some way. We as a company really believe in what open source software can bring to provide choice to libraries, to provide the option of how you want to integrate and work with different systems. And so that's really important to us. We also have a proven track record in security and privacy and performance, not only with our own EBSCO products, but now as we start to host Folio, for example, I mentioned our ISO certification, and that's really important to us, especially as cyber attacks and other things become much more prevalent. It's really important to make sure that your data is secure and usable for you. We have a strong commitment to interoperability, open APIs, and choice, as I had mentioned. We have a number of librarians working for the company, and it is still a family-owned company with a strong focus on giving back to and working with the library community. So I think those are all key things to mention as part of working with EBSCO. Now, if you're going to break our EBSCO Folio services down, I would break them into sort of 3 key areas. The first one being implementation. So we can provide a readiness service for you. So if you're interested in working with us to understand how you might need to make sure your data is prepped or what pieces of Folio you might want to use or not want to use, we can actually do an analysis of your existing workflows for you. So that's the readiness assessment. In addition to that, once you're working with us, we can provide a full-scale implementation of Folio. We can do just ERM or ERM first or some combination thereof. Do acquisitions before other pieces, depending on what you might need to do. And that includes the implementation process, data migration, as well as training. And then we also work with you on things like integrating your Folio system with other products and pieces. So that third-party integration piece is obviously a big piece of any kind of implementation process. Now, we would host your Folio system. So that's a big piece of that. I mentioned we've got AWS as our environment. We have AWS certified engineers. We provide high availability of performance and uptime based on the AWS installation, software updates regularly and backups, and then finally ongoing support once you're live. And so what we do once the Folio software, and we're using the standard Folio software with each release, we just do our own testing with it within the environment to make sure it's good to go. And then we release that and set up libraries with that. So here are the kind of key areas where we would work with you. So I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about the implementation process, just because I really admire the way our implementation team is taking implementations to a whole new level. We often refer to it as our white glove service. And by that, what I mean is that we do a lot more hands-on work directly with you. we actually sit down and map out your workflow and migration process. You're not left on your own trying to figure out, okay, well, this is how Folio works. How do we translate our existing ILS into Folio? We actually map out your existing workflows with you. We talk about how you might want to handle things differently or the same, and how that might translate into Folio, so that you feel more confident about where and how you might be using those different pieces. In addition to that, we also go through multiple iterations of data migration and testing of that data back and forth to really make sure that those different pieces are customized in there. We work with you on the integration of third-party pieces, whether that be ESBCO products or other products that need to be integrated within Folio. And then obviously the training and the change management is a key piece in that. And so I think that's where we really take what I typically have seen as the standard implementation process and take it to that next step, because of that workflow mapping and because of that real focus on training, change management, and making sure the system is working the way you need it to. So as I mentioned along the way, you can implement Folio in pieces. And today we're going to look at a little bit at the ERM functionality to see how you might want to use ERM as maybe a stepping stone into Folio. And so if you are doing that, for example, ESBCO ERM, you'd be working with things like agreements app, the ESBCO usage consolidation and loading service, and how that can integrate in with the eHoldings app. The eHoldings app within Folio then talks to and works with what's called the ESBCO knowledge base to manage your holdings. Folio has a licenses app. Folio also has a organizations app to manage your licenses and contracts, as well as the different vendors or consortia or other entities that might work with things. And so those are the kinds of things that we would set up so that you can utilize the ERM functionality within Folio. Now, if you're using Folio from a larger capacity or a different capacity, and you're getting support from ESBCO, then from there, you might be working with things like the circulation apps within Folio, data import and export within Folio. I mentioned Panorama, which is actually an ESBCO product that we've integrated with Folio to handle analytics and reporting, and that's what we call Panorama Essentials. Finance app handles budgets and funds within Folio, inventory app for your physical collection management within Folio, and then things like mark editing, orders invoicing, and users and more as more apps and things get developed within the system. So it really just illustrates the range of different ways you might be using and working with a Folio system. So I mentioned Panorama, and I wanted to just give that a quick little side plug because it's a relatively new product for us here at ESBCO. We actually did a formal webinar on it a couple weeks ago. And Panorama is designed as a next generation analytics platform. What's so exciting about it is that we are taking time to look at different data elements that might be fed into it, whether that's data from your ILS system, data that's related to maybe counter and e-resource management, data that might be coming from a campus system, data that might be coming from, let's say, an authentication system like EasyProxy or Open Athens, let's say, and how can we work with that data together to provide you as a library with best-in-class visualization tools to really see how that data can work together and paint a much broader and deeper picture of what's happening at your library. And so we're really excited about this. We've obviously done tie-ins with it in Folio, and I'll show you a little bit about that at the end. But here's a nice slide that illustrates the different types of data that you might be pulling in. So you can use Panorama regardless of whether or not you're using the Folio system. But the Folio system can be a data feed into Panorama. And here you can see the range of different types of data sources, everything from library resource tools to outside of the library tools that might be pulling in to paint that picture of the library, usage, student outcomes, all kinds of things like that that are important to folks. So I mentioned that as an example, but that's, again, part of the benefit of working with an organization like ESBCO to run your Folio system is that we can provide these integrations with other systems. So we can integrate Folio with panorama, let's say. We can integrate it with our EBSCO discovery service as your discovery layer. We can integrate it with Gobi for ordering and collection development, with EBSCOnet for your subscription management, and other pieces as well. And so this is really what that slide is meant to illustrate for you. So let's dive a little bit more deeply then into how Folio can be used as an ERM system, and what I'll call EBSCO ERM, because in this case we're using Folio, but we're also utilizing specific EBSCO tools along with it to really give it a full-scale ERM rich experience. So EBSCO ERM is part of Folio, and it's powered by the EBSCO knowledge base. So if you're choosing to use Folio ERM with EBSCO tools, otherwise known as EBSCO ERM, you'd be using the EBSCO knowledge base at its core. So I think that's one concept to make sure we're all aware of. And then from there, we've got the knowledge base at the core, and we need to start thinking about that overarching life cycle everywhere, everything from evaluation to user discovery that's covered in the ERM process. And that's where some of these other pieces all come into play. So a little bit more about the knowledge base. So the EBSCO knowledge base is extremely comprehensive. You can see some of the stats there about titles and packages, and it works where we're constantly adding and updating. You have a team and that solely focuses on our knowledge base to make sure that the packages and the titles are all up to date, that we're adding in new data accordingly. And so that you can see broadly what the different title lists are from various vendors, coverage, embargo data, et cetera. So all of that is there. And the beauty here, by having this knowledge base as your core, and by feeding it into and having it talk directly with Folio in real time, is that it involves a lot less manual data entry. It also removes any kind of need for batch loading of data, because the EBSCO knowledge base talks in real time with Folio. And that's a key piece in utilizing Folio ERM through EBSCO. So some of these features then are localizing your holdings. So taking then that knowledge base and making sure that it's updated so that it has your packages and holdings listed accordingly, that you've customized it if you have any special titles or custom packages that are part of that. And then viewing things and setting up details such as your license detail, contract detail, package detail, and then getting data in like counter statistics and usage statistics so that we can look at reports like cost per use analyses. So all of that plays in as background. And so the idea here is then you're going to see more usage because we've integrated these pieces. They're talking to each other more directly in real time. And users are able to then access and work with them much more easily because of this whole setup process, so they can get to them. And that obviously reflects itself in the statistics. And then it also makes easier renewals because you're able to see how all of this information compares and contrasts. And we'll see that shortly as I go live in the system, so that you can make better decisions about what products you may or may not need to use. I also mentioned EBSCOnet and Gobi, but EBSCO ERM is automatically updated when you purchase journals through EBSCOnet and ebooks through Gobi. And I think that's an important key to note here, which also helps streamline your back office processes as well. I mentioned that EBSCO has a usage consolidation and loading service, and this slide kind of goes through some of the pieces of that. The point being is we actually have a service where we can set up and load and retrieve your counter reports for you and set that up in an automated fashion so that you don't have to worry about it. Sometimes we even say, just let us handle the ones that give you a headache. And we'll take care of that data. But the beauty of pulling it in through this service is we've integrated it directly into Folio so that we can provide you with all sorts of reports about cost per use and other kinds of analyses. And so that's what we call our usage consolidation service, then, where we've not only loaded, but then we look at all of that data in comparison with itself. So as there is no need for a full Folio setup, you can start with EBSCO ERM first at any time, as I mentioned. But as we also talked about, Folio can be used in a whole host and variety of different ways. So with that said, I want to go live, and I'm actually going to disable my video while I do that, just so that that distraction there. All right, so I'm going to hop over to a browser. So Folio is web-based. you have a login for your staff login that you log in with. Here I have a super user login I'm using to go in, and that's going to provide me with access to the full Folio system. And so here I can see all of the different apps available to me. So everything from circulation to e-resource management, acquisitions, cataloging, etc. But what I also want to point out is that I can also sign in with a user who may just need to access a couple of the apps. So here I'm going to log in as Tim. Tim is our e-resource management librarian. Tim only needs to see the stuff that's related to e-resource management. And here he sees those apps. So there's tasks, agreements, e-holdings, licenses, organizations, users, and settings. So those are the things that Tim can access. So we can really customize that environment for you and your library and individuals at your library so that they only need to work with and see and view certain things. So to get started, let's start off with that e-holdings app. I often think of it as the backbone. So if you remember from the slides, e-holdings is what is getting populated from the knowledge base, from the ESBCO knowledge base in this particular case. Now, if you are a consortium, we can set up Folio where we have multiple knowledge bases working with it. So each library within the consortium may have its own knowledge base, and Folio can work really nicely that way. And here you can see I can search by providers. So maybe I'm searching by Wiley, for example, and I can see what's selected or the number of total selected packages and of the total package list. I can then drill down into that list. And as I scroll down here, I can see which ones have been selected. If I drill into one of those, I can even see then that particular package and its title list. So it's a nice, easy way to toggle through at the provider level if I want to. And as I mentioned earlier, it's extremely comprehensive. So if I'm searching by ProQuest or Gale or EBSCO or some other provider, those would all be there. I can also do a search at a package level. And if I'm creating custom packages, I can click this new button to actually create custom packages if I want. And I can similarly do the same thing and search at the title level and add in custom titles if for some reason there isn't a title in the knowledge base that I need to work with. But let's do a quick little workflow together. We've got about 10, 12 minutes left. So I'm going to enable a package. We'll then set that package up with what we call an agreement record in Folio and look at how that's attached to things like your license or contract and license terms and organization and other things. So, so here let's say we're going to acquire Political Science Complete, which happens to be an EBSCO database. And here we pull up that package. And I can see that it's not selected and here it has 1,500 or so titles that are a part of it. So I can pull that record up. I can see more detail about it. And if I want to activate it, I can actually click Add Package to Holdings. And by clicking and adding that, I've now activated it within the knowledge base, which also means that it shows up or can show up within the discovery service. So now all of this is available to my end users. In addition to that, I can scroll down and notice I have all sorts of different tools available to me, different things I can add. I can add different notes. I can see the titles that are a part of this. But what I want to point out in particular is that I can attach this package of titles to an agreement. So an agreement is basically your, I always think of it as like an ERM record. It's this overarching record that manages this particular holding within usually a vendor contract of some sort. So if I want to, I can create a new agreement or I can add it to an existing agreement. So maybe in this case, I already have an agreement for EBSCO, which I actually know I do. And so here I can scroll down here. I can see agreements for a variety of different vendors. You may even have multiple agreements for a specific vendor if you're getting different things from them and handling those in different times. But maybe we're buying this off of the consortial agreement. So I can select that and then tie that in. And so you can see how it is now tied in this consortial agreement with this particular e-holding. So now that's actually all pulled together. But while I'm here, I just want to point out too that I can also do editing of this e-holdings record, which allows me to set up trial workflows and other things because maybe you're not always purchasing something. But in this case, we are purchasing it. We did just activate it. Now we want to see how it's connected to an existing consortial agreement that we purchased it off of. And so I could either go to the agreements app up here and click on it, or I could just click on this button right here and click across directly to it into the agreements app and see that agreement for the EBSCO consortial agreement display. And so here it moved me automatically over into the agreements app, into that record. And if I scroll down, what you can see is a really nice overview of all the different elements about this agreement. So first, I'll start off with what we call the agreement lines, which shows the different packages, journals, or ebooks that might be part of that agreement. Now we can see that Political Science Complete is now part of that agreement. In addition to that, I can store other information here. Maybe this is a 5-year agreement. Maybe we know whether or not we're going to renew it. I can see internal contacts who might be working with this at my library. So these are people at my library who might need to manage this record. So it might be an ERM librarian. I might have a library director who might need to sign off on things. In addition to that, I can also store other data here, like my license detail. So I might have a controlling license. I might also have historical licenses that we might need to refer to. We might even be negotiating a new license and have that listed here as a future license that might go into effect. Regardless, if I click on this license link, this is actually going to take me into the licenses app, which is where I can actually manage that specific license record. And so you'll see here that license is different from an agreement. The agreement is the overarching ERM record, whereas the license is more of that specific contract. And so what you'll find if I go in and I edit this actual license record is you'll see that I might have this linked to organizations or vendors or consortial entities that we're managing and working with the license. But I can also store that license here. And so here you can see that I can drag and drop and add a file. I can also link out to files that might be stored somewhere else, or maybe on an internal drive or box or something like that. And I can add as many core documents as I want. And so Folio then becomes a really nice central storage point for things like your license data as well. Here I can also activate and turn on different terms of use. And some of these might be for internal purposes, like I want to see detail behind using this resource for distance education or indemnification clauses, etc. But some of them you might want to set up as public notes. And so I can set up public notes and type in detail there that can actually display across to the end user when they're utilizing the discovery service. And so that's really nice here, where as I set this stuff up on the back end, I can display that kind of information to the end user. So they may know why they may or may not have access to something. Maybe it's only so many user licenses, or you have to be a chemistry major to use it or something of that nature. But it's nice to be able to supply those public notes across. So those are just some of the highlights within the license record. And if you remember, we got there by looking at the agreement record. The agreement record, I can also view things like those license terms. Those will roll up there, as well as the organizations involved with it. And I can see other detail here, and also store documents here within the agreement itself. So maybe we have special access to certain things because of COVID-19, or there are other things going on right now that I want to add in documents. Maybe there's communication I've had with the vendor that I want to PDF and store here to remind myself of that. So lots of ways to utilize and store this kind of information. And that's really what I wanted to point out in some of these key apps. We could obviously spend a lot more time diving into it, but hopefully you've seen a couple trends and themes here with how Folio works. With each of the apps, there's usually some kind of searching with robust facets and ways of sorting through your data. On the left-hand side, you get your results in the middle, then you select a record and then can work with it in more detail here on the right. You can also set up these records where they might be view only to some people. Other people have the ability to edit and work with those records. And so maybe you give view only access to some of these agreement records to some of your staff so that they can see why and how some of these are set up, whereas other people might have the editing rights to work with it. On the line of staff members working with the system, there's also a relatively new app called the Tasks app. And what's cool about the Tasks app is it allows you as a library to set up different workflows. And now, because Folio can be used with e-resources and also print resources, you can set up different workflows for any type of resource that you want. You can see some around an acquisitions print workflow. We've set up an e-resource cancellation workflow, an e-resource renewal cancel decision workflow, and you build these for what you need them to be. So I could select this e-resource renewal and cancellation decision workflow. And here I've set up a couple of different tasks that are part of this generic workflow. So maybe I need to create the stats report for the subject liaison. I need to review the stats report. I need to contact the department head about the renewal. I need to contact the ERM librarian with the recommendation that I might have gotten from the department. And then the ERM librarian needs to contact the vendor to let them know. Now, these actions can then all be set up and created into actual jobs where you then actually assign these tasks to certain people, and they have certain time limits with which they need to get those done. So what's nice is then in the morning, if I've had some of those jobs or tasks assigned to me, I can actually go into the Tasks app and click what's assigned to me. Or if I'm a manager, I can look and see what tasks have been assigned to some of my staff so I can see what's going on. So this is a really nice way to manage some of that. And if I maybe see what's in progress, I can click on that filter just to see generally what's in progress, who's working on something. Maybe I know that Tony Hawk was assigned this, but he's actually out on vacation this week, or he's sick today. So maybe somebody else needs to do that. So as the manager, I might reassign that to somebody else and edit that. But this Tasks app can really provide some nice workflows, not only within ERM, but also around the system. So just a couple more things I want to quickly highlight just to give you a sense of Folio. Let me jump over really quick into Discovery, just to show you how some of that public information might display across. So Folio is the backend software, and then libraries then decide what they want to use as Discovery solution on top of Folio. So obviously at EBSCO, we can support EBSCO Discovery Service on top of Folio is that option. If we do a search for, let's say, a publication that was part of that database, Political Science Complete. So let's search for annual review of political science. And if I go into that full view detail here, here we can see where I might have access to that. So I can get this through Political Science Complete. And so here I can see that data displaying for me as well. And if I had any license terms about that, that would actually display for me as a quick little link next to that particular database as well. So there we have that title in particular. And let me just jump back and just point out a couple other things. In the latest release, the Iris release of Folio, which we're rolling out right now, we've also been integrating our usage statistics. And so here we can see we're in the eHoldings app, and I have this example ready for you, the Science Direct Freedom Collection, and we might want to see the usage statistics around that. And so if I scroll down here, you'll see there's this usage and analysis area. And this is data then coming from the usage consolidation and loading service from EBSCO. And I can toggle into which year I want to see. I can choose whether or not I'm looking at all platforms, publisher only platform, non-publisher platform, and then see things like the package cost, total usage, cost per use, and even download reports around title specific usage and export that into a spreadsheet to view in more detail. So there's some nice usage once we start seeing that used. And then the final thing I just wanted to point out, I mentioned how we could integrate Folio with our new Panorama product. Here is Panorama brought up. It is a web-based tool. And here, if we look at the e-resource usage screen, and we can look at print usage and all kinds of other things. But here just gives you a taste of what you might work with. It is based on Tableau, and we've set up these dashboards where you can then filter based on a certain date range, look at ebooks, databases, e-journals, whatever you want to focus on. maybe focus on a specific platform, a specific publisher. So lots of filters in which you can then see that different data usage. Here I like this particular ebook usage trend. So here we can see in blue the total item requests versus unique title requests. So we can see how that breaks out over time. Here we can see ebook usage by publisher, by total unique title requests and total item requests. Here we can see title details, and I can actually hover over these different blocks to see which titles are represented there, and I can drill down through all of this. So you have very dynamic reports and things to work with regard to Panorama and working with that in Folio. So obviously we're happy to talk with you about any of that in more detail. This was simply meant to be just a brief overview of all of it and to just give you a taste of some of these pieces. If you do want to get in touch for a much more full demonstration, here you can go to this URL, www.ebsco.com/request-information and fill out information. And obviously feel free to reach out to me directly to cholly@ebsco.com or your local salesperson. But it looks like we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'll try and get to as many of the questions as I can. So let me start working through some of these. So let's see, first question, do you use Folio with K-12 libraries? Does it work with the Folio Destiny system? So yes, that's a great question. Folio could be used in a school library environment, and it would just be a matter of sort of assessing where your needs are and how you might be wanting to work with the Folio system. As far as working with Folio Destiny, it would essentially replace a Folio Destiny system because you wouldn't need to use it in that case. But if you were to utilize Folio for just the ERM component, perhaps then you'd continue using Folio Destiny for your print management component. Let's see here. So that's that one. On to the next question. Does source metadata get updated when changes are made within Folio? Just in case bib frame, oh, I see, instead of zigzagging back and forth. So yeah, so the question was, I was talking about how there's source metadata stored. So if we're bringing MARC data into Folio, and that MARC data then populates what we call the instance records within Folio. How does that updating process work? Does it work back and forth? So you don't have to worry about them being out of sync. And no, you do not have to worry about them getting out of sync. The source metadata will work together with the inventory record. So that if you're working, let's say, as MARC as your source, then there might be certain fields you can only edit and work with in the source record. And then there are certain records within the inventory record that would then be protected as fields. So that prevents that from happening where you might get data out of sync. And so you won't end up with zigzag records, as you said. Let's see here, just looking through some other questions here. And I love the list. I appreciate all the questions today. And yeah, if we do run out of time, we'll certainly be getting back to you in more detail. There's a question here. We don't have a need for ERM. We just have a need for print ILS management. Can Folio work for that? And yes, it can. I realize I did a demo of the ERM functionality because we've seen a lot of libraries go forward with ERM. But yes, you can use Folio just for print collection management with no ERM. And so we're happy to work with you on a demo that just looks at the print workflows and set up an implementation around that. Let's see here. Working through the list. Is there an app for e-reserves? Yes, there is actually an app called Courses, and you can set up course records within that app. And then attached to the course records, you can then set up each of the linked item records. And those might be an e-item, or it might be a physical item. What's nice about that is you can then search in the discovery interface by data elements that might be in the course itself. So like the course title, instructor, cross-listing, a course mnemonic. And then from there, you'd be able to gather the list of items that are part of that course, whether they're e or print. Let's see here, scrolling through. Does the knowledge base live in Folio, or is this just a front end to the EBSCO knowledge base? It's a great question. So the knowledge base does not live in Folio. The eHoldings app, think of that more as a shell, and then you plug in the knowledge base to it. And so what's actually happening here is that the Folio eHoldings app is just talking via APIs in real time to the EBSCO knowledge base. So if you do updates within the EBSCO knowledge base itself, those will be reflected in the eHoldings app, and vice versa. If we do the activation of packages and things within the eHoldings app, then those will automatically be reflected in the EBSCO knowledge base. So those APIs really do come in handy. And I see we're actually at the top of the hour, and I love the questions, and we will be sure to get back to you with those questions individually and those answers. And without further ado, I will turn it back to, let me stop sharing here, turn it back to Mark, and he might have some closing remarks.
All right, well, thank you so much, Christopher. So much like that you can do in there. It's really astounding. I love seeing it all. So thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through Folio and sort of how it can work at academic libraries. I would just also take a minute to say thank you to everyone out there joining us today. We appreciate your taking the time, and as we sign out here, I would just remind folks that of course we did record the session today. So be on the lookout for a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And then if you have just a couple of minutes to answer 4 or 5 questions for us in a brief follow-up survey that should appear on your browser, we'd really appreciate your responses. So once again, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you in the near future on another webinar.
Thanks again. Bye, everybody.